For 15 years, I gave everything to this company. Early mornings, late nights, weekends sacrificed, all in the name of loyalty. I wasn't just an employee, I was the backbone of my department. I handled the biggest clients, solved crises that no one else could, and even trained half of the staff who now sat in higher positions. Promotions came and went, yet somehow I was always overlooked. But I never complained. I figured my time would come. The boss, Mr. Carson, would always say, "You're one of our most valuable assets. We'd be lost without you." I believed it. Until one day I realized I was nothing more than a disposable piece in their corporate machine. And when that moment came, they thought they had the upper hand. They had no idea what was coming. At first, the changes were subtle. My emails started getting ignored. Meetings I once led were now being held without me. The new management team, a group of younger, less experienced hires, suddenly had more say in things I had built from the ground up. Then came the real red flag. One morning, I found my access to the company's financial database revoked, a system I had monitored for over a decade. When I asked IT, they nervously mumbled something about restructuring. That's when it hit me. They were phasing me out. But instead of panicking, I started preparing. If they thought I'd walk out quietly after 15 years, they were in for a rude awakening. I knew I couldn't stop the inevitable, but I could control how it played out. Instead of confronting my boss or complaining to HR, I went into stealth mode. I began gathering evidence, saving emails, recording conversations, and keeping track of every shady move they made against me. At the same time, I reached out to key clients I had built relationships with over the years. Some of them were already dissatisfied with the company's new direction. I kept my conversations casual, dropping hints that big changes were coming. Then I made sure to secure my financial future. I quietly liquidated my company stock, transferred my savings to a secure account, and started setting up my own business behind the scenes. By the time they were ready to throw me out, I was already 10 steps ahead. The day finally came. I was called into a meeting with HR and my boss, and the moment I sat down, I knew what was happening. They put on their fake sympathetic faces and started with corporate nonsense. "We appreciate your years of service, but due to restructuring, we have to let you go." They avoided eye contact, thinking I'd break down or beg for my job. But instead, I just smiled. They handed me a severance package, expecting me to sign immediately. What they didn't know was that I had anticipated this months ago, and I was about to turn the tables on them in ways they never imagined. I looked at the papers, then at my boss and said, "I knew this was coming. And trust me, you're going to regret it." That's when the tension in the room shifted. For the first time, they looked nervous. My boss shifted uncomfortably in his chair, sensing something was off. I took my time flipping through the severance package, then calmly said, "You might want to double-check the numbers. I know exactly how much you owe me." I pulled out a dossier, a neatly organized folder filled with every contract violation, unpaid overtime, and policy breach they had made against me. My boss's face paled as he realized I had been documenting everything. HR stiffened, flipping through the documents. They knew I had them cornered. "These are serious allegations," the HR rep stammered. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "And that's just the start. I also know about the off-the-books deals you've been making." Now my boss looked truly panicked. He knew that if this information got out, it could lead to legal trouble, audits, and even terminations, not just for him, but for the entire management team. They had expected me to walk away quietly. Instead, I was holding all the power. The tension in the room was suffocating. My boss's fingers tapped nervously on the desk as he forced a smile. "Let's be reasonable here. Maybe we can work something out," he offered, his voice tight. But I wasn't here to negotiate. I had spent months preparing for this moment. I pulled out my phone, turned the screen toward them, and pressed play. A recording of my boss's private meetings filled the room, conversations where he mocked employees, discussed shady financial dealings, and even boasted about illegally cutting severance packages to save company costs. The HR rep's face turned ghost white. "Where did you get this?" My boss croaked, his voice barely above a whisper. I leaned back, enjoying the panic settling in. Does it matter? What matters is that everyone, your employees, shareholders, and maybe even the press, is about to hear the truth. My boss shot up from his chair, slamming his hands on the desk. "You wouldn't dare." I simply smiled and clicked send. Within seconds, the recordings were uploaded to a secure platform and emailed to every employee in the company. And just like that, the empire he had built on fear and deception began to crumble. The moment the emails hit inboxes, chaos erupted. Employees gasped as they played the recordings, some whispering in shock, others outright furious. The HR rep grabbed her laptop, frantically typing, "Damage control." But it was too late. Phones started ringing. Board members, investors, journalists. My boss's face turned red as he shouted at his assistant, "Shut it down. Stop the emails." But there was no stopping it. A whirlwind of messages flooded company chats. "Did you hear what he said about us? Wait, he's been stealing from severance packages. This is illegal. Someone needs to report this." Employees began forwarding the evidence, posting it online, tagging business watchdogs, and even reaching out to labor unions. And then came a knock on the door. A board executive and the company's legal counsel walked in, their expressions unreadable. They weren't here for me. "Mr. Reynolds," the lawyer said, his voice cold. "We need to have a word." Now, the blood drained from my boss's face. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. "I'll show myself out," I said, grinning as his world burned behind me. As I walked out of the conference room, my phone vibrated. A flood of messages. The company's stock had started to plummet. Investors were already pulling out. I turned back for a moment, just in time to see my ex-boss being escorted out of the office by security. His face was a mix of rage and disbelief. A man who thought he was untouchable now reduced to nothing. The headlines followed within hours. CEO caught in shocking employment scandal. Severance fraud exposed. Major corporate fallout. Employees speak out on toxic workplace. Board of directors takes immediate action. CEO removed effective immediately. I smiled. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice. But I wasn't done yet. I sat in my car, pulled out my laptop, and logged into a new email account. Subject: to everyone who was wronged. I sent a final message to the employees who had suffered under this man for years. Every legal resource, every contact, every way they could fight back. And within minutes, the replies poured in. I had started a revolution. The days that followed were pure chaos for my ex-boss and the company. The employees, now armed with proof of wrongful terminations, unpaid wages, and toxic work conditions, began filing lawsuits. News stations picked up the scandal, airing interviews with former employees, including me. The company's reputation took a nosedive overnight. But the real nail in the coffin. The board of directors, desperate to save face, issued a public statement. After a thorough internal review, we have decided to cut ties with our former CEO and launch an investigation into unethical business practices. We regret any harm caused and will take corrective measures immediately. It was official. He was done. But for me, I was just getting started. Because while they were scrambling to contain the fallout, I had already secured my next move. The day after the news broke about the company's downfall, I received an unexpected call from a former colleague who had recently left the company. They were now with a competing firm and had heard about what happened. They were eager to offer me a position. But it wasn't just any position, it was higher up than the role I had held at my previous company. It was clear that they had been keeping an eye on me and my skills. I had always been respected in the industry, and now with the public exposure of my old company's shady practices, my reputation had only grown stronger. By the end of the week, I was signing a lucrative contract with a company that valued me and the expertise I brought to the table. It felt like a full-circle moment. The same company that once dismissed me after 15 years of loyalty now saw the true value of my experience and leadership. While they were struggling to rebuild, I was already plotting my next big move. They had no idea what was coming, and frankly, neither did I. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this chance slip by. A few months into my new role, everything was falling into place. New opportunities, a better work environment, and a level of respect I hadn't felt in years. Then, out of nowhere, I received a call from my ex-boss. It felt surreal. After all, this was the same person who had quickly dismissed me without a second thought. The call came with a calm but nervous tone. It was clear they had no idea how to approach me now, especially after what had happened with the company's downfall. They wanted to meet. The reason? To apologize, they said. But it wasn't just any apology. It felt more like an attempt to save face. I agreed to the meeting, knowing this would be my chance to show them that I wasn't as easily replaced as they once thought. We met at a coffee shop, a neutral location, but the tension between us was palpable. My ex-boss looked uncomfortable. I was darting around as they tried to maintain composure. "I know I didn't treat you right," they started, but I could tell it wasn't genuine. They didn't realize how much damage they had done to our professional relationship, and this was just them trying to recover their own image. I kept my tone steady but firm. "You didn't just dismiss me. You dismissed the years of dedication and hard work I put into this company." They shifted uncomfortably. "I know. I regret that decision." But I cut them off. "It's too late for regret. I've moved on, and I'm better off." They didn't know how to respond to that, but I could see the regret in their eyes, the realization that they had underestimated me, and now it was too late. We parted ways without much more being said. But for me, that moment was everything. I had reclaimed my power, and I wasn't going to let anyone dismiss me again. Months passed after that meeting, but the truth about my former employer continued to unfold. It wasn't just about the apology. It was about watching the downfall they had brought upon themselves. Karma was already working its way through the company. The short-sighted decisions that led to my dismissal were now catching up to them. The new team they had hired to replace me was struggling, and the company was losing key clients left and right. They had clearly underestimated the value of what I brought to the table. I was doing great in my new role. My skills had been recognized. My new company was thriving, and I had a level of respect I had never been given before. I could already sense that my old boss's position at the company was in jeopardy. Then it happened. The company announced that they were going through a major restructuring. Top executives were laid off, including the person who had so arrogantly dismissed me. It was ironic, really. They had fired me, thinking I was the problem, and now they were paying the price for it. Watching the entire situation unfold gave me a sense of vindication, the satisfaction of knowing that everything I had predicted was coming true. When I heard the news about my old boss's departure from the company, it felt like a final victory. Their arrogance, their dismissal, and their disrespect had all led to their own demise. But it wasn't just the job that had changed for me. I had grown and evolved in ways I never could have imagined. Leaving that toxic environment had opened the door to better opportunities, healthier work-life balance, and most importantly, the freedom to be myself. As for my ex-boss, they may have lost their job, but I'd already gained so much more. Respect, self-worth, and the power to define my future. And that, in the end, was the real success.